My name is Sarah. I'll be doing the presentation today. I apologize, my camera isn't working, so can't see my face, but it's not at a loss to you. I'd like to introduce today who we have with HPHA. Included in our meeting is Sharon Espejo, our acting Section 8 branch chief, Marcus Asami, our landlord liaison, and Taryn Rivera, one of our Section 8 staffers. We also have Ben Park, who is our planning chief, and Nick Ayabe, who is our housing planner, who works under Ben, and he'll be moderating today's training. If you have any questions, Ben, did you want to say anything?
Yeah. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. I just want to give a special shout out to Lindsay Garcia and Aaron Espinueva with the Hawaii Association of Realtors for helping us to make this happen. And also Ms. Karen Cardoza with the National Association of Residential Property Managers. Thank you so much for helping us to set this up today. Also want to give a shout out to our Deputy Director, Ms. Barbara Arashiro. She is also in this Section 8 online training, and just want to apologize on behalf of our Executive Director, Hakeem Wansafi. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it today, but I just want to say thank you all for joining us, and in respect for everyone's time, I think we'll just go ahead and jump right in it. And we'll take questions at the end. So please feel free to send us questions in the chat. I'll monitor the chat and put together your list of questions that we can address when we're done. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Nick, next slide. All right, so just some quick housekeeping measures. We will be, this training will be recorded and posted online. So we do ask that you keep your microphones off throughout the training period. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat as Ben stated. You can direct message Nick Ayabe, he will also be, or Ben. They will be moderating the chat and answering questions, assisting to answer questions at the end. In the event that I am working from home today, so in the event that I lose connection or have to jump off for some reason, one of my one of my colleagues will pick up where I leave off. Thank you. Next. So the purpose today is to provide some general information to everyone, to our landlords, whether you're part of you're currently participating in Section 8 or not, about our program, how we work, as well as some incentives, landlord incentives that we have coming down the pike very, very soon. So the general topics today, we're going to give you an overview of HPHA and our program, go into our lease-up process so you guys have a good understanding of the work that we do, as well as the work that how we take it from getting somebody actually into housing, as well as some landlord obligations and responsibilities on your behalf, and then we'll get into these landlord incentives. All right, so generally, HPHA is a state agency. We were established in 1935, and our mission is to provide adequate, affordable housing, economic opportunity, and suitable living environment for low-income families and individuals free from discrimination. One of the ways we do accomplish this is with our Section 8 program. So this is a rental assistance program that helps low-income families afford housing within the private market that's safe, decent, and sanitary. This is different than our public housing, which are properties that HPHA owns and operates. We are funded by the federal government through the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And thank you. Next slide. So there are a variety of vouchers that we administer, including housing choice vouchers, which are the most common. We also have mainstream emergency housing, not medically disabled, tenant protection, and Veterans Affairs supportive housing vouchers. These are vouchers that are related to the types of families that we serve, but don't alter how the program overall operates. And it's, the term Section 8 is a universal term that encompasses all of these vouchers. So in and of itself, that's not something, these different types aren't something that you, the landlord, need to be aware of. We also, in addition, have a state-run supplement program, which provides subsidies up to $500. It's possible that some of you might be participants in this as well. The information that we're sharing here today does not influence the state-run supplement program in any way. Next slide. So HPHA operates our Section 8 program on Oahu only. Each county does, in addition to us, operates Section 8 in their respective counties. So on the island of Oahu, there are two different Section 8 programs, one under HPHA and one under the city and county. So everything that we're discussing here today regarding landlord incentives apply only to the programs that we administer. However, everything else regarding the lease-up process, those sorts of things are similar, if not exactly the same, across the state. Next slide. So this is a general diagram that shows the relationship between HPHA, the family, and the landlord. Each relationship is separate in and of itself. So we have a relationship with the tenant or participant through the use of a voucher. You have your relationship with that tenant through your lease agreement, and we have a relationship with you through the HAP contract. Next slide. So there are several steps that go into leasing up. We'll go through these one by one, starting with marketing the unit. Next slide. So the first thing that goes into effect is, you have to advertise for your unit. There's no real difference. Our tenants, we advise them to search both newspaper advertisements as well as online resources in order to search for units. We all know the common ones, Craigslist and whatnot, that you guys advertise, but we do also will assist in advertising units that you have available. So if you have something, you have a unit or multiple units that you are about to put on the market or they're available right now, please send them to us. We're more than happy to post them at our property. We also this is information that we provide at our tenant orientations that we give for every time a participant is getting ready to move. And we do have some, we're all working to see if we can get some online venue available to do some advertising as well. One thing that I'm sure many of you are aware of is starting in May of this year, a new law will go into effect that prevents discrimination based on source of income. That's including, which encompasses the Section 8 program. And if you guys do want to read it, it's a pretty short bill. It's 7 quick pages, and it's Act 310. Next slide. Just a little bit about the Act 310. It will be considered a discriminatory practice if you're you're advertising that you don't take subsidized housing, such as the use of no Section 8 in your ad listings. If you discourage a family from renting your property because they participate in housing assistance, if you try to steer them away, oh no, you don't really want us, go to the people down the street. If you refuse to rent to someone just because they're participating in housing assistance, or if you create different or additional conditions to rent from people participating in a housing assistance program. Next. However, landlords are still still permitted to vet your tenants, the Section 8 applicants, just as you would any other tenant. So if you actively do credit checks or background checks, if you call previous landlords, those sorts of things, that same process still applies to qualify the tenant. However, we would like you to take into consideration the fact that these are subsidized. So, the majority of the rent, if not all of it in some cases, will be paid out from public housing. So please, when it comes to the income requirements that you may have, please take that into account and don't hold that against them. Additionally, if a landlord owns less than 4 or rents out owns less than 4 dwelling units, this won't apply to you. And if a landlord is renting a unit that has 2 units in the same building, of which the landlord is living in one of them, then it also doesn't apply. So if it's a duplex where there's 2 single families within that duplex that's attached and the landlord's within one. Also, if the landlord is renting 1 to 4 bedrooms of a home that they live in, including ADUs. And this, for the most part, won't apply to Section 8 as a whole, as most agencies don't, or at least our Section 8 program generally does not allow shared housing. So for a participant to live in the same unit as the landlord. Okay, next slide. So screening and tenant selection. The next step is again with you guys. So like I was saying before, go ahead and continue to do credit checks, criminal background checks, landlord references, and any other type of references you generally do. It's, you want to make sure that you have a good tenant that will, based on your standard qualifying practices. And, the vouchers right now are not something in the past that you guys generally need to look at, but if you are curious about the voucher itself and the expiration date, you can always ask to see that from the tenant. Next slide. So you qualified the applicant. You've done your background checks, your credit checks, whatnot. They qualify. The next thing to do is to complete the paperwork. So every applicant that we have, every ongoing participant who's moving, they go through an orientation process where they're re-educated on how to be a good tenant, their tenant obligations, those sorts of things, and they receive a voucher and a request for tenancy approval packet. This is several pages. Would be the first page. This would be the first form that you would be receiving. It's a 2-page document. And so we would be asking that you guys fill this out and return it to us. Next slide. The form is asking for unit address, the unit size, so how many bedrooms, the structure type, whether it's a high-rise, low-rise, single-family home, the the types of security deposit amounts you're asking for, the proposed rents, and the utilities. Closure of any known deficiencies. This form needs to be signed by both you and the tenant. And this is the key piece that we work off of in order to qualify the unit once the paperwork comes to us. Next slide. Additionally, in the packet are forms that we need you, the landlord, to complete in order for us to pay you. So we're going to have an owner information sheet that's general information, your contact info. We're also asking for the relationship to the tenant. This is a very important area that we need to know. If you have any familial relationship, direct contact. We also ask that you and the tenant fill out a lead-based paint form, and then we're going to need to, we have some 1099 and W-9 documents that we need to provide, as well as a direct deposit form. And we really encourage you to fill out that direct deposit form. It'll get your funds to you much quicker. You know, this is one packet per tenant. Please don't make duplicate copies and just keep them on file. To use them, the form does change periodically. The things that we ask do change periodically, and you know, you want the information to always be correct and accurate. Next slide. Sorry, before I continue, what we do also check is regarding the forms that you have. We will do a city and county record check to make sure that you own the unit. We don't want to. We don't approve subleasing. So if you've leased to John Smith, we don't want John Smith trying to sublease it out. So we will check to make sure that the landlord or owner who's listed on the forms is in fact the owner. We also do a check to verify the unit type to make sure that it's our one way to check. One of our ways to check that safety and sanitary, and not illegally modified or without city approval. Going on, after you complete all the forms, you're going to provide them. You're going to send them into Section 8. You can do that yourself. You can drop it off. You can mail it. You can email or fax. You could also, if you're comfortable with it, you can give it to the tenant to drop off as well. Once we have the form, your paperwork, we're going to start by doing an affordability review. So I just kind of want to, this can get kind of confusing. This is a question that these are questions that we generally field from landlords. So I want to spend a little bit of time going through this. We will calculate if the tenant's portion, the first thing we need to do is calculate if the unit is affordable for the tenant. So this, every year we put out a payment standard chart. This is the one that's currently in effect as of January of this year. And this is the max amount that HBHA is allowed to contribute per unit if the tenant has zero income. So I'm going to go and give you an example in a moment. But this is the max amount in general that we're allowed to pay per zip code. So in the case of if the unit that you have available is Hawaii Kai 96825, that's our tier 1, and that the max amount for a family of a one-person household who has a 0-bedroom voucher is going to be $2,360, and it decreases as we go down with our 13th tier, including Waimanalo and Waianae, 96792 and 96795. For that same bedroom type would be 1,300. So it decreases. These are reestablished every year. And they're basically, we're a metropolitan area under the definition of HUD. So every year HUD will put out, will issue fair market rents by zip code for the island of Oahu. HBHA in the city and county respectively will group the zip codes into similar fair market rent amounts and put them into tiers. We've tried to be as flexible as possible this past year, which is why we have 13 tiers, so we can try to maximize the amount that we're able to pay out at any one time. And so these individual tier levels are considered small area fair market rents. Where the goal ultimately for this is to encourage families to be able to look for housing in higher opportunity areas. In the past, or some of the neighbor islands, you're given one payment standard for the entire county, which can limit how where people live, because it's, you know, some higher areas might not cover that payment standard amount. So in this case, we have some flexibility in what we're allowed to pay per zip code. For fair market rents, the HUD allows us to adjust what we pay out of that fair market rent between 90 and 110% generally. In 2013, HUD did allow HPHA to go above the 110% for certain tiers. And so some of our bottom tiers, we go up to about 117%, because we understand that, especially after COVID, where there were caps on landlords being able to increase their rent, once those moratoriums were listed, that those rents were increased. And so we want to be able to assist our Section 8 families to find housing as quickly and as easily as possible. But again, we expect that requirement to go down in 2024 back to that max of 110%. Now, this doesn't mean that this is the max that this doesn't mean that this is limited to certain to that specific unit type. If a family is, like I said, it's a one-person family, we're going to issue them a zero voucher. If they're able to find a one-bedroom unit or a two-bedroom, any unit size higher in, let's say, that Hawaii Kai for that $2,360, then they're going to be able to submit paperwork, and we'll assess it for that. So they still may be able to rent higher units with their voucher amount. However, a family is not allowed to pay at their initial move-in and lease signing more than 40% of their income towards their rent portion. So I'll go into this in the next slide. Next slide. So here's an example that I just kind of want to give you. We provide a form very similar to this to all of our tenants whenever they are moving. So they have a better idea of what they can afford. So based on this participant's income, their rent portion is estimated to be $368. So like I said, let's say they're looking for a one-bedroom unit in Hawaii Kai. So the max that payment standard tier amount is $2,360. Their rent portion is $368. If you subtract that from that payment standard amount, you'll get $1,992. This is the max amount based on their income that HPHA is allowed to pay towards that unit. Now, this doesn't mean that this is the highest that a unit can be. Let's say this unit, the unit does cost $2,360 for that one bedroom, and utilities are included. So you're gonna have that, and this would be the max that we pay. But let's say that the unit is actually a little bit more. We're gonna assess it and see if the tenant can afford it. So in this case, 40% of their adjusted income is actually $490. So the unit could actually go as high as $2,482, and they would still be able to rent that unit if they wanted to. Like I said, as in my example, this is if utilities were included within the rent. You'd have to take into account if utilities were not included in the rent. We do assess a utility allowance. In this case, for this one-person family with a 0-bedroom voucher, that amount, let's say if the landlord was going to make the tenant responsible for all of the electric charges, right now for this year is assessed at $215. You'd have to take into account that that amount would be deducted from this this payment standard to get a better idea of what that actual rental unit can be. And then going forward, this does not apply as if a tenant remains in the unit past that 1-year lease term. If you want to raise your rent and it's considered reasonable, and we'll get into rent reasonableness in just a moment, the tenant, if they choose to remain in the unit, they can pay more than that 40% amount. So let's say this unit was actually at this point $24.82 and they're maxed out at that 40%, and next year the landlord wants to raise it to $2,500, and that goes above their 40%. If the tenant wants to remain in the unit, they can, but they're going to be taking on that difference. So, and that can go as high as the unit, as the tenant really wants to pay towards their portion. And if they don't, then they have that opportunity to leave after that year. Next slide. So after the affordability, it's going to come to rent reasonableness. And with affordability, if that unit is, and I do apologize, if the unit is out of that 40% range, even if it's by $1, then you might be getting a call from us to ask if you're willing to decrease that rent. And that's your choice if you do. Let's say you do, let's say it's $1 over, you decrease it to that $24.82 amount, then we'll go along to our rent reasonableness check. And this is where we compare the unit price to like units in the surrounding area. So if it's a 2-bedroom unit, single family home, we're going to look for other 2-bedroom single family homes of the same with the same features. So if the tenant is responsible for all electric plus water and sewer, and maybe it has a pool or something, we're going to look for similar units of that type and size with those same utility obligations. And we're going to make a comparison. So we're going to compare 3 units and we're going to assess it for the rent reasonable amount. And if it doesn't, again, this is when we may call you and ask, hey, it's your rent is that $24.82 amount, but actually the reasonable rents that we've assessed in the area are actually $24.50. Would you mind dropping it that $32 to get it down? And again, that'll be your choice if you want to do it or not. If you choose, you may also challenge the rent reasonableness that we assess, and you can go ahead and you can go get 3 rent comparables as your own and send them to us. So we do these 2 checks, affordability and rent reasonableness, separately. So just because the unit is, if the unit is amount at that payment standard amount, it doesn't necessarily mean that it'll pass affordability. You can see in the payment chart that the payment standard chart that we showed, in many cases, there are multiple zip codes in an area, and the rental prices can change even within its own zip code. The Kalihi area, it spans from very low to some pricier units, as an example. And so just based on that, that core area where that unit is located, it could be a little lower than maybe other parts in that tier. But it is definitely your choice to either accept what we're proposing, or you can challenge and select 3 other units to compare. And one of those units can be within the same complex, the same building complex. So you own an apartment, and another apartment in the building is renting, another 2-bedroom unit is renting at a higher amount. you can go and you can submit that, and 2 other ones in the neighborhood. Next slide. Okay. Timeline wise, we process the affordability and the rent reasonable check fairly quickly. So the day of or the next day that we receive the RTA packet, we'll go ahead and we'll do that affordability check. And it's assuming it passes, and we go ahead and we pass it along to the next stage to our inspections, who will do their rent reasonable check. And they again take about a day to do. You know, it fluctuates. They're often very quick, but sometimes there might be a large amount that they get done. But usually the total, I would say, takes 1 to 3 days tops to get these initial 2 things steps completed. Everything passes, affordability and rent reasonable is done. We're going to move in and we're going to go ahead and schedule an HQS inspection. So HQS is housing quality standard. And this must be done in order to allow a family to move in. These are, the form is a standard HUD form that we use, HUD form 52580. If you're curious, you can take a look at that online. It's publishable. And these are the minimum health and safety standards to ensure that the unit is safe, decent, and sanitary. And these units should be move-in ready at the time of inspection. So let's say you've agreed to rent a unit to a tenant. It passes all these things, but you know, you just your former tenant just moved out. You went in and actually there's a couple of items that still need to be corrected. Let us know, especially once the inspections calls you to schedule an inspection. If we need to delay it a couple of days until the unit is actually ready. The inspection will be scheduled, so the actual date of the inspection within 2 weeks of receiving the unit being qualified for the participant. So it passes the affordability and the rent reasonable check. So if you're not, so generally, with, like I said, within those 2 weeks, but if for whatever reason you need a little bit longer, make sure that you're informing either the individual who's working on the initial processing, but more importantly, the actual inspector. And then once the unit is complete of the inspection and ready to be inspected, give the inspection team a call and they'll schedule one right away. Next slide. So the initial inspections occur Monday through Friday during our normal working business hours. So between 7:45 and 4:30 Monday during the week. If a unit fails its inspection, the owner will be notified, landlord will be notified in writing. Often if the landlord is present at the inspection itself, you know, you'll know right away, and the inspector will be able to point some of that stuff out to you. But regardless, we will send something formally in writing. And for initial inspections, we do need to come out and view the correction itself to actually pass it. So it's if it's something quick and you're able to do it really soon, and the inspector is aware of that, you know, they may give you your phone number and they may be able to come back out that day, but likely it'll probably be within the next couple of days, 1 or 2 days, that the inspector will actually be able to make it out. Inspections are pre-scheduled, but they do try their best to work with the landlord to come back and make these follow-ups, so if the unit can be passed as quickly as possible. Next slide. Also regarding inspections, we do annual and special inspections. So this is something that we found through our discussions with landlords that they actually do. So, you know, your tenants may not always inform you if there's an issue with the unit, if they've clogged the toilet, they may not want to endure those costs, those sorts of things. And so they may not always tell you about it. Under our policies and our regulation, our rules, we do annual and special inspections. So we'll do an inspection annually, and then additionally, if you feel that there's an issue with the unit or the tenant feels there's an issue in the unit, you guys can always request a special inspection. So this is outside of the additional or annual. We'll come in and we'll inspect the unit. Let us know what the issue is, obviously ahead of time, if you're able to provide some documentation so we know exactly where to look, and we can go ahead and do that. And we try to special inspections schedule very, very quickly, because, you know, we don't want there to be issues with the unit. If that is special inspection results in an emergency condition, so life or health threatening, then there will be a requirement to fix the repair within a 24-hour period. If it's a non-emergency inspection, non-emergency condition, then we'll give the landlord or the tenant, whoever's responsible, 30 days to complete the repairs. These repairs, the non-emergency, we'll do, all you have to do is provide email, you know, take pictures of the corrected deficiency that we'd cited, email it to us, or drop off documentation, pay, you know, receipts and those sorts of things that have been corrected, and that can be approved that way. If it's an emergency issue, then we're actually going to have to go out and inspect it in person to ensure that it was completed. So some extreme examples that we've experienced is, you know, a roof collapsing. For an emergency is a roof collapsing, or somebody backing their car up into a building. But, you know, this also counts as can be, you can request a special inspection if there's a, you know, the tenant hasn't been paying their electricity, those sorts of things. We definitely want to know that information. And these requirements apply regardless if it's an annual or a special inspection. And often this 30-day period, it tends to go a little longer. So if we inspected a unit mid-month, that 30 days would fall under the, you know, mid the next month, but in actuality, you have until the end of that following month to get the unit corrected. And this will determine on our assessments whether the deficiency needs to be corrected by the landlord or the tenant, because we do understand that sometimes the tenant does do the damages. So we'll put that in. If the unit fails because of the landlord, and the landlord doesn't fix the deficiency within that required period of time, that 30 days, we will abate the unit. That means we'll hold our HAP portions. The tenant is still required to pay their portion, but we won't pay ours. And for the period that the unit is abated, the landlord is not eligible to receive that HAP portion amount. So we'll prorate the HAP until the unit is corrected. But again, the tenant is always required to pay their portion. If the unit fails because of the tenant has the same amount of time to correct the unit. And if they fail to, they're putting their voucher at risk. So they're risking the possibility of homelessness, and those sorts of things if they don't correct it. So there's motivation on their side as well to to fix deficiencies that they've caused. Next slide. All right, so we've done our inspection, and it has passed. The unit is perfect and ready to go. The tenant can go ahead and sign the lease. Some landlords want to be very nice, and they may want to allow a tenant to move in prior to a unit passing inspection. And if you do so, then the tenant will be responsible for that full amount of the rent until the inspection passes. So we do recommend that you hold off until the unit passes or until we've given specific permission for a tenant to move in. But as soon as the inspection passes, a tenant can go ahead, sign a lease, and move in. This slide is a little bit out of order, so we'll move into the lease next. But go ahead and sign and send that lease to us as soon as possible. If there's delays in signing the lease and submitting it to HBHA, then that takes more time for us to get the HAP contract issued and signed by both the landlord and the agency, which may delay payments from going out to you. So once the tenant, you guys decide on a move-in date, go ahead and sign that lease and send it to us. Because we are not allowed to pay any HAP payments until we have a signed HAP contract. Go ahead, next slide. So this is overall the lease-up process. The first, this part A includes all the information that's going to be included within the actual HAP contract that the tenant that the landlord and agency signs. So it'll include all of the family members who are party to the lease. They need to be approved by the agency. So if they're trying to add on additional household members that we don't have any knowledge of, then we'll be contacting you to amend that portion of the lease to go back, and it'll be the tenant's responsibility to inform us of who those family members are. So the HAP contract will include all approved family members, the unit address, the initial lease term period, the monthly rent amounts, and we'll break it down for what that initial HAP portion will be. It'll also include what the utilities are and our signature page. The next, obviously, the lease itself. So that copy of the lease, again, the lease should have the contract terms, any prohibitions against discrimination, owner's breaches, conflict of interest, and access to premises and other information regarding the lease itself. And then the next part is going to be the tenancy addendum. So this is actually included in that RTA packet that we provide to you. So it should be a part of your copy of the lease, and it'll be a part of our copy of the lease as well. To note, generally for things like rent increases, we don't require a new HAP contract to be signed. But other significant changes to the lease that we will. So if you have the tenant on a yearly basis sign a new lease with a new lease term, we're going to want to go ahead and update our HAP contract to reflect that. If the initial lease, the owner is responsible for all of the utilities, and you want to change that and let the tenant have the tenant be responsible for utilities, we're going to need to approve that. So that would go through any kind of that have to be submitted in writing to us. If it's approved, then we would sign a new HAP contract to notate that significant change. Rent increases and changes such as that utility switch that I just discussed needs to be provided 60 days before the effective date of that change if we don't receive it. So let's say you want to make it effective April 1, and we just received that information today. We're not going to be able to approve it for the effective date April 1. We're going to go to the next full month, 60 days out. So it'd be effective June 1st for any kind of rent increase. And obviously those rent increases and utility changes, if applicable, would be only made after the initial lease term is completed. Next slide. So the lease agreement itself, we don't accept any leases less than 1 year old. The landlord should be signing the lease as well as the tenant. Please don't send us a copy of the lease that just has one signature on it. And again, we are not able to pay HAP until the HAP contract is signed. Next. And again, this is what I described. Our tenancy addendum needs to be included. It basically breaks down some of the requirements and obligations of the landlord, as well as the tenant and the landlord and HBJ. Next slide. Security deposits. So we do not have any influence on the security deposits that you charge your tenant. So if the unit costs $1,300, if the tenant's portion is $100, you can continue to charge a security deposit of that $1,300 to be paid by the tenant. And the security deposit should not exceed more than 1 month's rent. And that security deposit can be used, as you know, to pay for any kind of tenant damages that go into that a tenant might cause. Next slide. Okay, so the next step, and I believe the final one, is you're going to be receiving rent. So as soon as a lease is signed, you send it to us. We can get that HAP contract issued, and as soon as that HAP contract returns to us and gets signed and is fully executed, we'll begin to pay out rent. Technically, we have 60 days to get this done, but we get it done sooner than that. We are now very close to being fully staffed. We're pretty up to date on all of our moves and the move-in process. Everybody's trained, and so they are processing these very, very quickly. So we want to pay you out as soon as possible. And so the benefits of Section 8, honestly, is you get timely and dependable payments from us. In cases where the tenant may lose all of their income, they lose their job, you'll get full payment. You don't have to worry about your tenants not coming through and sending and paying their rent. So it's guaranteed income for you. Regular inspections, so the upkeep of the unit is taken care of. And reasonable rents, you can continue to increase your rent. There's no stop on that. We have an online landlord partner portal that I encourage everyone, once you become a Section 8 tenant, to be a part of. This is a great way to track the deposits and HAP payments that are coming out to you. And it has some other nice features on it as well. Marcus, our landlord liaison, can go into a little bit more information to you about that if you want to send him an email. Also, with renting to HBHA Section 8 tenants, you'll have the benefit of receiving some of our landlord incentives, which I'll be going into right now. And honestly, you're helping low-income, elderly, or disabled families in our communities. And this is our most vulnerable population. So you're doing a good thing. Next slide. Some landlord obligations. Generally, both landlord and tenant are responsible for maintaining the units. Owner is responsible for normal wear and tear, as well as general maintenance, and the tenant is responsible for any deliberate or accidental destruction or misuse of the property. As a reminder, life-threatening conditions need to be addressed within a 24-hour period. Next slide. And similar to non-Section 8, all landlords have a duty of fair housing. So I don't want to get into this too much. I'm sure you're all aware of those obligations. Next slide. As well as violence against women. We do have issues within our program, all programs, and in the public. We do have issues of domestic violence that occur. And so there's some landlord, just be educated and aware of that. Next slide. All right, landlord incentive programs. So These programs that we're going to be addressing are only for HBHA landlords. So like I said, we only operate on the island of Oahu. And so this isn't something that neighbor island landlords would be able to take advantage of if they only have neighbor island units. Also, this isn't for city and county Section 8 program. We received the legislature a couple of years ago passed some laws that established some programs and provided some funding for us to implement them. We also recently been designated by HUD to enable some of our federal funding to go into some of these programs as well. So I'll go into a little bit of detail about that. But currently, what we'll be enacting later this month, hopefully, will be a tenant caused damage reimbursement program, as well as signing bonuses and vacancy loss payments. Next slide. So generally, we want to make the incentives portion application as easy as possible for landlords. We plan to keep everything on about a 2-page form. So all the programs that we'll be discussing today will be on hopefully maybe a 2-sided form, which will be included within the RTA packets as well as on our website. Next slide. So regardless of the incentives you're applying for, we're always going to request information about you and the tenants and the unit itself, so we can match up to the correct unit. We are also in the process of establishing some videos to go into a little bit more detail about each landlord incentive. Next slide. You can go to that website that was listed on the previous page to see a little bit more information about some step-by-steps about the programs, but to go into very briefly, this first one that we'll be doing is tenant reimbursements. So we will we'll reimburse the landlord up to $3,000 over the cost of security deposits to fix damages caused by the tenant. Repairs don't need to be completed at the time that you're applying, but you will be required to provide documentation of those damages. You may be required based on the level of cost you're trying to get reimbursed for, to provide estimates from contractors and provide documentation that you've utilized the security deposit to its fullest. Those sorts of things. This program itself is completely state funded, so it's subject to the availability of funds. We currently have funding for it, but we do rely on the legislature to renew that funding on a yearly basis. So we may not always be able to get this out. Our next one is, the next couple ones are very, very similar. We understand that it does take time to move families into units based on the inspection process and those sorts of things. It could take maybe a month sometimes. So we're trying to, in addition to the fact that, you won't, starting in May, discriminate based on source of funding, we do want you to want to be one of our landlords and to work with us. So for all new landlords entering into the program, we will pay 1 month's rent as a signing bonus per unit that you're renting for the first time to an HVAC Section 8 tenant. So this is not per unit, per landlord, it's per unit itself. So if you have 10 units that you've never rented to us before and you rent them all out to Section 8, you get that signing bonus 10 times. Next slide. Next is our vacancy loss payments. So you've rented to us, or you've rented to one of our tenants, that tenant has moved out. If you lease up again with another Section 8, another HPHA Section 8 tenant, then we're going to give you a vacancy loss payment. Again, up to of that 1 month's rent to consistently renting to one of our program participants. And this there's no limit to how many times you can receive this this particular incentive. So if one of our section tenants moves out and you lease up with another one right away as your next immediate tenant, you'll get that bonus. If you keep doing that, tenants continue to move out and you lease up again to an HBHA participant, you'll continue to receive that vacancy loss payment. If for whatever reason you want to, but you're not able to find a tenant and you have to rent to a non Section 8 HBHA participant, a regular anybody, but that guy moves out and you rent to HBHA participant again immediately after, you'll receive a vacancy loss payment for returning to the program. And you have the opportunity to get that one time. So really, we're trying to encourage continuous program participation. So if you continue renting to us, then you'll continue to receive those benefits. Next slide. So what you can look forward to is, like I stated, we will be putting out a series of training videos addressing different aspects that we've talked about today. We're planning to go a little bit more in depth about what to expect for an HQS inspection, those sorts of things, different elements that might be of interest to you. We'll do short training videos on that, so it's easy to review. As well as videos a little bit more in depth about our landlord incentives. And then we will be initiating some additional incentives as time goes on. So the next one that might be coming in the next few months is possible waivers of that actual HQS inspection at initial. So moving in, if your unit qualifies, as long as it's past affordability and reasonableness, you'd be able to move that tenant in right away, and we would expect the unit at a later date. But you'd still be, with that kind of incentive, you'd still be able to qualify for, one of those vacancy loss or signing bonuses. So as long as there's that vacancy, which there would be. So, we'll keep updating you as we go on. We'll update our active landlords that we have, as well as updating the Realtors Association to pass along more information to you as we go about. Next slide. We do want to just appreciate what you guys do and the work that you do and what you provide to the community. If you have any questions going forward about Section 8 in general, how to be requirements of a landlord, about some of our landlord incentives, those sorts of things, feel free to contact Marcus Asami, our landlord liaison. He's more than happy to answer some questions. That's his email, or you can also email our general HBHA box, and we'll make sure that